She only wanted to erase a stain, but what the human left on her body went far deeper. Get ready, this HFY story begins now. The orbital station Nexus 7 hung against the black tapestry of space, like a jeweled pendant, its rings glimmering as they rotated with precise mechanical grace. From a distance, it looked serene, an oasis of civilization straddling the boundary between human territories and alien spheres of influence. Up close, however, Nexus 7 was anything but tranquil. Its bustling hubs never slept, and travelers of dozens of species moved with practiced rhythm through its corridors, each carrying their own burdens, secrets, and desires. For Jake Graham, an astro-engineer who had spent most of the past decade in deep space assignments, Nexus 7 wasn't a planned destination. It was a forced detour. His ship's compression coil had failed with an alarming cascade of sparks and energy surges. He could still picture the readouts, flickering red alarms screaming, and the sickening moment when the containment field shuddered on the verge of collapse. By instinct and hard-earned training, he'd diverted power, shut down systems, and prayed the backup field would hold. Somehow it had, barely. He managed an emergency docking before the entire ship became cosmic debris. The station's repair crew hadn't been sympathetic. 3 days, the mechanic said, with a shrug, his four-fingered hand already moving to the next datapad. Jake knew enough to translate that into at least 5 days, maybe more. Repairs in space followed their own sense of time, and nothing ever finished on schedule. So here he was, stranded in the neutral zone, restless with nothing to do but wait. Jake dragged a hand through his dark blonde hair, feeling the grit of engine residue that still clung despite his attempts to wash it away. His broad shoulders carried the tension of a man who didn't trust idleness. He'd survived space by moving, fixing, solving. Waiting was harder than any emergency repair. When the boredom became unbearable, he found himself wandering through Nexus 7's central hub, where glowing signs and multilingual advertisements fought for attention. One sign in particular caught his eye, a steaming mug rendered as a hologram vapor curling upward into neon letters that shifted between languages. The cosmic mug. Something about it, the simplicity, the promise of warmth, drew him in. Inside, the atmosphere was strange and mesmerizing. The cafe used partial gravity modulation, giving the interior a dreamlike feel. Drinks hovered slightly above tables, anchored only by magnetic coasters. Patrons guided their cups with gentle nudges, sipping from floating spheres of liquid that shimmered like tiny planets. Conversations overlapped in dozens of tongues, human voices blending with clicks, hums, and melodic trills from species Jake had only ever seen in research files. He slid into a corner table, unzipping his Space Ranger-style jacket. The gray t-shirt underneath clung to his athletic build, a shirt well-worn and softened by years of service. It wasn't much, but it was one of the few personal possessions he'd grabbed during the frantic evacuation of his ship. The fabric carried memories, training academies, long shifts at the engine core, quiet evenings staring at stars through viewports. The coffee, when it arrived, was surprisingly good. It had a sharp, earthy bite, nothing like the bitter slurry he tolerated on long voyages. He allowed himself a rare sigh of contentment, and that was when he saw her. She moved through the cafe with a fluid grace that defied the reduced gravity, as though the very laws of physics bent to accommodate her presence. Her skin gleamed jade green, catching the station's ambient light until she looked almost luminous. Silver-white hair cascaded in soft waves down her back, contrasting sharply with the deep blue of her bodysuit. The garment clung to her curves unapologetically, its plunging neckline daring the eye even as it highlighted her alien elegance. Jake caught himself staring and looked away, but something kept pulling his gaze back. It wasn't just the way she looked, it was the intensity etched on her features. She carried a bowl of liquid that glowed with an electric blue light, her amber gold eyes fixed on it, as though sheer focus could keep it stable in the delicate environment of half-gravity. It might have worked too if not for the sudden scrape of a chair. Another patron shoved back without looking right into her path. She swerved sharply, overcorrecting in the tricky physics of the cafe. Jake started to rise, the warning on his lips. "Watch out," but he was too late. The collision wasn't violent, but it was inevitable. The bowl slipped from her hands, the shimmering blue liquid breaking free of containment. In the slowed ballet of reduced gravity, the soup formed perfect globes that floated for a fraction of a second, beautiful, almost hypnotic, before splattering across Jake's chest and face. "Oh, stars!" The alien woman gasped, her jade green complexion darkening at the cheeks in what looked suspiciously like a blush. "I am so sorry." Jake blinked through the blue mess, swiping a hand down his face. The substance was cold with a citrus tang that prickled his nose. His once gray t-shirt now bore an abstract artwork of neon stains spreading like vines. "It's fine," he said automatically, though his shirt clearly disagreed. "No, it's absolutely not fine," she insisted, already reaching for a dispenser of napkins. Her voice carried a melodic lilt, the consonants shimmering in the air, as though each syllable had been dipped in silver. "That's Lydian cold soup. If it sets the stain as permanent, we have to act quickly." Jake dabbed uselessly at the shirt, managing only to smear the stain further. He gave a resigned half-smile. Well, maybe this old thing was due for retirement anyway. Her golden eyes flashed, locking onto his with an intensity that startled him. "Please, I can fix this. My quarters are close. I have the proper solution there." She hesitated, cheeks darkening further as she realized how her offer might sound. "For your shirt, I mean. I can clean your shirt." Jake couldn't help himself. A small smile tugged at his mouth. There was something irresistibly endearing in her flustered urgency. "I'm Vela," she added quickly, as though names might restore the balance between them. "Jake Graham," he replied, extending his hand in the human custom. For a brief moment, she only studied it as though weighing the ritual. Then with careful precision, she placed her hand in his. Her skin was warm, soft in a way that caught him off guard. "So," she said, glancing at the spreading stain across his chest, "about that shirt." Jake glanced down, then back up with a half smirk. "Lead the way." As she guided him out of the cafe past curious glances from other patrons, Jake had the oddest sense that something larger than a ruined t-shirt was about to begin. Vela's quarters lay within the residential ring, a quieter sector of Nexus 7, where corridors curved with the station's rotation. Unlike the sterile guest modules, Jake had expected her door slid open to reveal a space that felt alive and inhabited. Soft holographic displays floated above small pedestals, projecting landscapes Jake didn't recognize. Rolling golden plains, crystalline forests, skies lit by twin suns. Along one wall, transparent containers held plants with leaves that shifted subtly in the artificial breeze, glowing faintly as though they pulsed with their own inner rhythm. The faint scent of greenery hung in the air, a welcome change from the metallic tang of recycled station oxygen. "You've been here a while," Jake observed, stepping carefully into the room. 6 months, Vela replied, moving to a storage alcove with purposeful grace. She knelt to retrieve something, her silver-white hair falling forward in a curtain. "I'm a xenobotanical researcher. The station serves as a neutral hub for my work." Jake nodded, intrigued despite himself. "Plants in space. I wouldn't have thought this was the place for it." "You'd be surprised," she said, lightly flashing him a quick smile over her shoulder. "Neutral zones make the best meeting points for knowledge exchange. Fewer political agendas, more science." Before Jake could reply, a sharp tone cut through the room. The station's automated system boomed in multiple languages. "Attention all residents and visitors. We are experiencing a Level 3 system malfunction in gravitational controls. Please secure all loose items and prepare for potential zero-gravity conditions. This is not a drill." The voice cut off abruptly, as if confirming its own warning. A split second later, Jake felt the familiar stomach-tilting shift. His boots lifted from the floor. His body rose weightless as though invisible strings had cut loose. Loose objects joined the drift. A scarf that had hung by the door floated lazily upward. A half-finished cup on Vela's counter twisted in mid-air liquid, trembling at its rim before breaking into floating droplets. Even the neon stains still on Jake's shirt released faint blue beads that hovered like tiny planets escaping orbit. Vela gave a startled yelp as her footing slipped. Her body rotated slowly, arms reaching instinctively for purchase on air that offered none. Jake reacted without thought. Years of spacewalk training surged into muscle memory. He pushed off the wall with controlled force, drifting toward her with measured precision. In zero-G, too much speed could be worse than none at all. His hand found her waist, steadying her rotation before it could spin out of control. Their momentum merged, leaving them suspended together in the middle of her quarters. For a moment, all Jake registered as her warmth beneath his palms. The blue fabric of her bodysuit was thin, and he could feel the living heat of her body radiating into his hands. Their faces hovered inches apart, breaths mingling in the fragile bubble of air between them. Vela's golden eyes widened, pupils dilating as they locked with his. The luminous flecks within them caught the emergency lighting, turning her gaze into molten fire. "I didn't expect laundry to go this way," she said softly, a nervous smile tugging at her lips. Jake chuckled under his breath, the sound more intimate in the muffled silence of zero-G. "And I didn't expect a repair delay to turn into the most memorable moment I've had in years." Around them, her belongings floated like pieces of a surreal painting, glowing soup droplets, a scatter of data chips, a drifting fern leaf still swaying with the phantom of artificial breeze. But Jake barely noticed. His entire focus was Vela, the feel of her waist under his hands, the slight tremor in her breath, the undeniable electricity strung between them. Neither moved away. The silence stretched heavy, not with awkwardness, but with possibility. Jake found himself speaking before he could think. "So, is this how you usually entertain visitors?" Her laugh bubbled out, bright and melodic, the sound seeming to dance in the weightless air. "If I could control gravity malfunctions, I'd be commanding starships, not studying plants." Still, Jake said, his voice low, "I can't complain about the company." The emergency lights bathed everything in a soft amber glow, tinting Vela's jade-green skin into shades of burnished gold. She was so close that Jake could trace the faint, delicate patterns that seemed to lie just beneath her skin, barely visible in the dim light. As they drifted toward the wall, Vela steadied herself by reaching out to one of her plant containers. Her hand brushed the leaves, and suddenly the fern inside pulsed with bioluminescent blue light. Jake blinked. Did that plant just say hello?" Vela's eyes lit up with excitement, her earlier embarrassment forgotten. "Yes, they're luminary ferns. They communicate through light signals. This pulse means they recognize presence, almost like greeting." Jake followed her movement, guiding himself closer with careful nudges. "On Earth, we've only just begun to understand how plants talk through root networks and chemical signals. Nothing like this." Earth, Vela repeated, savoring the sound as though it were music. "So much water, so many ecosystems." "I've read about it." Her eyes softened. "What is it like, living under a single sun?" Jake smiled faintly. "Predictable. You'd think it's dull, but there's a rhythm to it. Sunrises, sunsets, nights filled with stars." Her gaze turned dreamy. "On Meridian, our binary suns chase each other. We never have full darkness. Always golden light somewhere on the horizon. But it makes your night sky—" She paused, searching. "Mysterious. To us, true darkness is alien." The words hit Jake with unexpected weight. Something about the innocence in her question, paired with the depth of her longing, left him momentarily speechless. "It's humbling," he said finally. "Standing under stars makes you feel small but significant all the same." Their bodies drifted closer again, caught in an invisible orbit. Neither seemed willing to break. Jake's hand, still steadying her, shifted slightly, fingers brushing the small of her back. Vela inhaled softly, eyes flicking to his mouth before returning to his. The space between them shrank to a whisper. "In zero gravity," she whispered, voice husky, "we're all just bodies in motion, until something or someone changes our trajectory." Jake's chest tightened. The metaphor wasn't lost on him. He felt it, the pull between them, as real as gravity, more inexorable than any engine calculation. "Then consider me changed," he murmured. Her cheeks darkened to a deeper shade of green, the alien equivalent of a blush. Her hand rose, hesitated, then rested lightly against his chest. The touch was soft, exploratory, yet carried an unspoken invitation. For a long heartbeat, they floated suspended in that fragile balance, two beings adrift, discovering that collision could mean more than accident. Then the station shuddered, a tremor of systems fighting to stabilize. The shift nudged them fractionally closer until their foreheads brushed. Neither pulled away. For a while, neither of them spoke. The room hummed with the faint thrum of the station's systems, struggling to stabilize gravity, the air alive with floating artifacts of their interrupted normality. A half-unpacked crate bobbed lazily near the ceiling, a silver scarf spiraled like a ghostly ribbon, and droplets of blue soup shimmered like tiny stars. Jake pulled in a steadying breath, trying to will his racing heartbeat back into control. But Vela's closeness made that nearly impossible. Every time his gaze drifted to her face, he found something new. An angle of her cheekbone highlighted by amber light, the way her silver hair floated around them like strands of liquid. Light the subtle glow that seemed to emanate from beneath her skin. "You noticed them," she said quietly, her voice soft, carrying both hesitation and a hint of pride. "Noticed what?" "The patterns." She turned slightly, guiding his hand with hers. Her fingers rested over his wrist, gentle yet deliberate, before she brought his palm toward the exposed skin near her collarbone. "Look closely." Jake's eyes narrowed as his hand brushed her skin. At first, he thought it was a trick of the low light. Then he saw it faint threads of luminescence like constellations beneath jade-green skin. They pulsed faintly irregular, yet deliberate glowing in quiet rhythms that reminded him of the ferns she'd shown him. "Bioluminescence," he murmured, "like your plants." Her lips curved into a soft smile. "Similar. But ours are far older, woven into our biology for countless generations. They are how we communicate emotions with one another, a language that doesn't require words." Jake studied the shifting light, mesmerized. The delicate lines seemed alive, not just glowing, but resonating patterns that flickered faintly with her breath, her heartbeat, her mood. "And you're showing them to me?" he asked, his voice almost reverent. Her gaze met his, steady but vulnerable. "Normally they're only visible to another meridian or in complete darkness. But you can see them even now." "Why?" "I don't know," she admitted, a faint tremor running through her voice. "But it feels significant." The idea hung between them like a fragile glass sphere. Jake's thumb brushed lightly across the glowing skin, and Vela's patterns brightened in response, rippling outward in a cascade of soft golden light. They respond to touch, to connection, she corrected gently. Not just physical, but emotional. The patterns reveal what words might hide. Jake let out a low whistle. That would make poker night a little tricky. Her laugh spilled out melodic and bright, though her cheeks deepened in color. "It does remove the luxury of deception," she agreed. Then more softly, "but it also removes the pain of doubt. We choose one another every day, openly, honestly. Nothing hidden, no chains of fate or obligation, only choice." The words struck him with unexpected weight. He thought of Earth, of strained relationships fractured under the stress of long-distance deployments, of secrets left unspoken until they poisoned everything. The idea of a bond built on daily choice felt raw, terrifying, and profoundly beautiful. "That sounds," he searched for the right word, "honest." "It is," Vela said, her eyes luminous with sincerity, "and sometimes difficult, but the most worthwhile things often are." Silence returned, but it wasn't empty. Jake could feel the truth of her words echoing inside him, stirring places he hadn't examined in years. Then she tilted her head, a mischievous glint sparking in her golden eyes. "Do you know what you're wearing?" Jake blinked, caught off guard. He glanced down at his still stained shirt, a ruined t-shirt. Her smile widened. She reached out her fingertips, brushing the blue streaks smeared across his chest. The patterns beneath her skin flared softly at the contact. "On my world, Lydian, cold soup isn't just food," she said quietly. "It's tradition. It's served at bonding ceremonies. Weddings in your terms." Jake froze, his breath catching. The absurdity and weight of the revelation tangled together in his chest. "So you spilled marriage soup on me?" Her cheeks flushed darker green, though she didn't retreat. "Not intentionally, but yes." For a moment, Jake could only stare. Then a laugh broke free, unexpected and genuine. "That's one hell of a way to propose." Vela's laughter joined his, but it was softer, almost shy. "I didn't mean it like that, but our traditions, they can be strange to outsiders." Jake shook his head, still grinning. "Strange maybe, but also kind of poetic." He met her gaze, his smile fading into something more serious. "Accidents that mean more than we expect." Her patterns pulsed again, faint ripples of golden light that seemed to mirror the quickening of her breath. He realized with a jolt that he wanted to see more. To understand this culture where honesty glowed beneath the skin, where daily choice mattered more than destiny. He wanted to know what Vela looked like when she let the patterns flow freely. "What do they say now?" he asked, nodding toward the lights that pulsed faintly under her skin. Her gaze held his unwavering. "That I'm intrigued, that I want to know you better, that I don't want you to leave." The last words slipped out, more vulnerable than she seemed to intend. Her patterns flared brightly, betraying what her voice tried to soften. Jake's chest tightened. He'd been stranded on this station reluctantly, but now he wasn't so sure he wanted repairs to finish quickly. Before he could respond, the station trembled again, sending them both drifting in a slow spin. Vela reached out instinctively, her hand catching his shoulder, steadying them both. The contact drew them closer until their noses nearly brushed. "Careful," she whispered, though her voice held no urgency to move away. "Always," Jake murmured back, his hand sliding to the small of her back again. They hovered there, suspended not only by the absence of gravity, but by the weight of possibility. Vela's gaze softened, her golden irises glowing faintly as her patterns rippled outward. "Do you feel it?" she asked quietly. Jake swallowed. "Feel what?" "This pull. This resonance." Her words trembled, but her hand pressed more firmly against his chest, directly over his heart. "It's rare. So rare." Jake let out a slow breath. "Yeah," he admitted, "I feel it." The truth hung naked in the air between them, undeniable as the stars outside. For the first time in years, Jake wasn't thinking about broken coils or repair delays or missions left unfinished. He wasn't an engineer calculating probabilities. He was simply a man adrift in a room filled with alien plants and floating soup, staring into the eyes of someone who felt less like a stranger and more like a trajectory he was meant to follow. And though he couldn't explain it, he had the unsettling, exhilarating sense that his life had just changed forever because of an accident, a shirt, and a bowl of glowing blue soup. The silence between them might have lasted forever, if not for the sudden chime of Vela's research console. The sleek device mounted into the wall came alive with cascading amber alerts, its surface rippling with data streams. Vela stiffened. Her golden eyes flicked toward the readouts, then back to Jake with an expression that shifted rapidly from curiosity to shock. "What is it?" Jake asked, his hand still lightly resting on her back. She drifted away reluctantly, fingers brushing controls in practice motion. Holographic displays expanded in the air, graphs, biopattern overlays, neural resonance scans. Jake recognized only fragments of the data. He wasn't a xenobiologist, but he knew enough to tell something was wrong. "Your bioelectric field," Vela murmured almost to herself. "It's fluctuating, no amplifying. These readings shouldn't be possible." Jake frowned. "English, please. What does that mean?" Her gaze snapped to his. "It means you're carrying something you shouldn't, something dangerous." The words chilled him. "Define dangerous." She expanded one of the graphs lines, spiking erratically. "These are vortex particles. They're theoretical quantum elements that exist in the subspace layers of reality. My people have studied them in simulations but never confirmed physical evidence until—" She looked at him, her expression grim. "Until you." Jake's mouth went dry. "How would I even have picked up something like that? When did your ship's compression coil fail?" 3 days ago. Her hands flew across the console, cross-referencing timestamps with the readings. That makes sense. A containment breach, even for seconds, could have allowed exposure. The particles ride energy surges like parasites, and now they're inside you, resonating with your neural pathways. Jake swore under his breath, but the station med team cleared me, said I was fine. "They wouldn't detect this," Vela said sharply. "Human scanners aren't tuned for subspace anomalies." Jake's mind raced. "Okay, so what does this mean? Am I radioactive contagious?" "Neither exactly," she said, though the way her patterns flickered told him she wasn't entirely certain. "But your presence could destabilize sensitive equipment or other biological systems. The particles amplify natural bioelectric signals. That's why my patterns lit so brightly with your touch. Our compatibility readings spiked off every chart." Jake pinched the bridge of his nose. "So my bad luck is now some galactic anomaly." Vela didn't laugh. She was staring at the console with dawning dread. "There's more. The system has already transmitted the data to my supervisors. Jake's head snapped up. And that's bad because protocol requires immediate quarantine. Her voice was tight. Security teams will be dispatched to contain you, study you. They won't care about your rights or your comfort. To them, you'll be a specimen, not a person. Jake felt his stomach twist. He'd seen enough bureaucratic procedures to know she wasn't exaggerating. So I'm about to become a lab rat. Not if I can help it. Vela's eyes burned with sudden determination. She moved quickly, inputting override commands that bought them precious minutes. But you need to understand, we don't have much time. A sharp tone sounded from the door, the first chime of security's arrival. Jake swore again, louder this time. They move fast. They always do when anomaly alerts go off. Vela turned back to him, her patterns glowing with urgency. Listen, there is another way. A treatment my people have theorized for years but never tested with a human. Jake raised an eyebrow. Let me guess, risky. Her cheeks darkened to green. Risky and intimate. Complete biometric synchronization can generate harmonic frequencies capable of neutralizing vortex particles. Biometric synchronization, Jake repeated deadpan. In non-scientific terms, her golden eyes met his directly unflinching. In human terms, making love. For a moment, Jake could only stare. You're saying the cure is... Yes, Vela's voice was steady, but her blush betrayed the weight of her admission. Our luminescent patterns aren't just cultural, they're conduits, bioelectric channels designed for resonance. When two compatible beings bond, the patterns create fields that can reshape energy, including vortex particles. The door chimed again, sharper this time. Jake let out a strained laugh. You're telling me my options are trust security and get caged, or trust you and... His words trailed off, but his meaning was clear. Vela stepped closer, her hand resting against his chest again. I know it's sudden. I know it's not how either of us imagined this. But Jake, if we don't act, they will take you. And once they do, you won't get a choice. Her touch was warm, grounding. Jake met her gaze, searching for doubt. He saw none, only urgency, sincerity, and a flicker of vulnerability. The door chimed a third time, more insistent. Jake exhaled slowly. Well, I've never been much for laboratories. He allowed a crooked smile. What do we need to do? Relief flashed across her face, softening into something almost tender. We synchronize. Fully. Physically, emotionally, mentally. We let the patterns align. Sounds complicated. It's honest, she countered, echoing her earlier philosophy. No walls, no secrets, only choice. Jacob's throat tightened. Of all the ways he'd expected this detour to unfold, this scenario wasn't even on the list. But as he looked at Vela, the woman who had spilled soup on him, who had laughed with him, who had shown him plants that spoke in light, he realized something strange. He wanted to trust her. The pounding at the door escalated, muffled voices of security officers demanding entry. Vela moved quickly, calling back in a professional tone. One moment the subject's neural stability is fragile. Immediate removal could trigger a cascade failure. Jake caught the faintest smirk, tugging her lips before she returned to business. She was buying them time and doing it flawlessly. The officers hesitated, exchanging muted conversation. Then you have 30 minutes. After that, the director will override your lock. The voices faded, footsteps retreating. Jake let out the breath he'd been holding. That was impressive. They'll be back, Vela warned, turning the lights of her quarters down with a quick command. The glow of her patterns brightened in the dimness, painting her skin in flowing golden lines. We have less than 30 minutes. Jake raised an eyebrow. No pressure, huh? Her lips curved faintly. On the contrary, pressure is exactly what we need. Despite the gravity of their situation, or rather the lack of gravity, Jake laughed softly. Okay, researcher, let's synchronize. The room dimmed to a warm amber glow, shadows stretching long across the walls. Outside Vela's quarters, the muffled echoes of security boots faded, but the tension they left behind lingered like static in the air. Jake sat motionless for a moment, the weight of the decision still sinking in. Every instinct told him he was crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed, but wasn't that the point? Vela turned back from the console. The low light traced her figure in golden edges, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing brighter with each steady breath. They spread like rivers beneath her skin, weaving across her collarbones, spilling down her arms, shimmering faintly even through the thin fabric of her bodysuit. Jake, she said softly, her voice stripped of the professional tone she had used moments earlier. Once we begin, there is no stopping halfway. Synchronization requires full resonance, mind-body emotion. Are you certain? Jake stood his bare feet touching the soft, adaptive flooring that shifted slightly with his weight. He looked at her, the alien woman who had collided with him in a cafe, who had spilled soup down his shirt, who had offered laughter and philosophy in equal measure. He gave a crooked half smile. You asked me earlier if this is how you normally entertain visitors. I think I have my answer now. Her cheeks darkened to a deeper shade of green, but her eyes held steady. I warned you it's not simple. Nothing worth it ever is, Jake replied. He stepped closer until their faces were just inches apart. I trust you. Something softened in her then. Her patterns rippled outward in golden cascades, and for the first time Jake realized they weren't random. They were answering him, reflecting her emotions as clearly as any words. Then we begin, she whispered. She reached for the fastening at her collar, fingers trembling only slightly as she released the seal. The bodysuit's front opened with slow deliberation, revealing more of her glowing skin beneath. The patterns blazed like living constellations, sweeping down her sternum, branching across her ribs, flowing in intricate designs over her stomach. Jake drew in a sharp breath. It wasn't just beauty. It was art, alive, a living symphony etched into her body. In my culture, she said quietly, this moment is when I would ask for your pattern in return. Jake glanced down at his chest, then back at her with a helpless laugh. I don't glow. Her smile curved gently, almost mischievous. She placed her hand over his heart. You do, just differently. Your pulse, your breath, the way your eyes change when you look at me. These are your patterns, Jake. They are just as beautiful. The sincerity in her voice disarmed him more than any flirtation could. He placed his hand over hers, pressing it against his chest. Then see me. Her patterns surged, brightening until they lit the dim room with a golden glow. The light reached for his hand, curling around his fingers, as though her very skin wanted him closer. The resonance begins with touch, she murmured. Follow where it leads. Jake obeyed. His palm slid from her chest to her shoulder, fingertips brushing the luminous designs that rippled under his touch. The sensation that rushed into him was unlike anything he had ever felt, a warmth that wasn't just physical, but vibrational, humming through his bones, echoing in his skull. He gasped, I can feel it. Her golden eyes widened. You can, like music, he whispered, awestruck. Music without sound. She trembled, her breath catching. That shouldn't be possible. No human has ever. Her words dissolved into silence as Jake leaned forward, closing the last of the space between them. Their foreheads touched, and the hum intensified, spreading through both of them like a tuning fork struck against the soul. The air around them shimmered faintly. Loose droplets of blue soup, still floating from earlier, trembled, aligning as though caught in invisible waves. Vela's patterns brightened in pulses that matched the rhythm of Jake's heartbeat. She shuddered. The synchronization is stronger than I imagined. The particles, they're responding already. Jake's grip on her tightened. Then let's not stop. She guided him toward the wide surface that served as her sleeping platform. It adjusted beneath their weight, adapting to their forms as they settled onto it. The resonance field between them pulsed stronger now, vibrating in harmony with their movements. Share, she whispered urgently, her lips brushing his ear. Every thought, every feeling, don't hide. Jake swallowed hard. Human intimacy had always thrived on silence, on unspoken cues. To speak every sensation aloud felt impossibly raw. But when her patterns flared at his hesitation, he forced himself open. I'm scared, he admitted hoarsely, but I want this. I want you. Her answering smile was radiant, her patterns exploding in golden fireworks that swept across her skin. Then we are aligned. As they moved together, the resonance deepened. The vibrations surged, harmonizing at frequencies neither of them fully understood. Jake's vision blurred and then expanded. Suddenly, the world fractured into spectrums he had never known. Ultraviolet patterns danced along the walls. Infrared signatures shimmered from the equipment. And most breathtaking of all the energy web radiating from Vela's body, a lattice of light that pulsed in sync with his own. I can see it, Jake whispered in awe. The field. I can see everything. Vela's golden eyes widened, her breath ragged. Impossible, she gasped. No human should... She broke off, staring into his pupils. Your eyes, they're refracting like a meridian's. The revelation hit them both with equal force. Whatever was happening wasn't just saving him, it was changing him. And then the flood came. Memories that weren't his crashed through Jake's mind in brilliant fragments. The warmth of twin sunsets over golden plains, the dense embrace of alien oceans, the faint vibration of bioluminescent forests whispering through the night. Vela's childhood laughter, the ache of her first departure from home, the loneliness that had trailed her for years, hidden even beneath smiles. Jake gasped, overwhelmed. I can feel you. Everything. Her patterns blazed, brighter tears glistening in her eyes. And I feel you, your storms, your hunger for connection, your stubborn hope. The resonance surged again, stronger, purer. The vortex particles inside Jake screamed in response, their destabilizing influence buckling under the harmonic field. One by one, they dissolved their dangerous energy, dissipating into harmless pulses that rippled outward through the room. Jake clung to her voice raw. I see you, Vela. All of you. Her tears spilled, freely scattering into weightless droplets that caught the golden glow. And I see you, Jake Graham. The patterns across her body spread until she was a living constellation, every inch of her glowing in radiant harmony. The field enveloped them both, transforming fear into wonder, danger into connection, chance into destiny. The console beeped, flashing readings in frantic approval. Vortex particle levels neutralized. But neither Jake nor Vela cared about the machine. For them, the universe had narrowed to this moment, their bodies, their minds, their hearts aligned in a resonance that transcended biology. Time collapsed. Minutes bled into eternity. When the final surge of energy pulsed outward, washing the room in a silent wave of light, both of them collapsed together, trembling and breathless, but undeniably whole. Jake blinked, his vision slowly returning to human normalcy. The extra spectrums faded, leaving only the woman curled against his chest, glowing faintly with fading luminescence. That was, he began, words failing him. Vela nestled closer, her voice husky but sure, unprecedented. He laughed weakly. That's one word for it. She smiled against his skin. You're safe now. The particles are gone. The chime of the console reminded them reality hadn't paused. The timer had reached its final seconds. Security would be at the door any moment. Vela pressed a hurried kiss to his chest, then scrambled to fetch a medical gown. She thrust it toward him, cheeks flushed. Quick, put this on. If they see you like this. Jake smirked but obeyed, slipping into the sterile fabric, even as she resealed her bodysuit. They exchanged one last loaded look, half triumph, half longing, as the door chimed. Vela drew in a steadying breath and opened it, revealing 2 officers and an older Meridian in formal attire. The director. Jake stood tall despite the gown, the resonance still thrumming faintly inside him. He and Vela shared one unspoken truth. Whatever the world outside this room decided, something profound had already changed within them, and perhaps for the galaxy. The hiss of the door filled the room, followed by the heavy steps of security boots. Jake instinctively straightened on the examination platform, doing his best to look like a patient rather than a fugitive. The sterile medical gown clung awkwardly to his frame, but at least it hid the faint golden shimmer that still lingered in his skin. 2 officers entered first, one tall, 4-armed and severe, the other stockier, with scales that shimmered like oil. Behind them came a figure that made Vela stiffen, an older Meridian, his formal robes patterned with elaborate luminescence, visible even through the fabric. His patterns pulsed with authority, every line precise and deliberate. Research Specialist Thalen. The director's voice cut through the room like a blade. Your unauthorized procedure triggered every alarm in our monitoring systems. Explain yourself. Vela didn't flinch. With respect, Director Fowle, the procedure was necessary. The human subject was contaminated with vortex particles. Removal to quarantine would have been dangerous for him and for the station. Stabilization required immediate action. The director's gaze slid to Jake Sharp in assessing, and was your method successful? Jake forced himself not to fidget. Vela turned to one of the officers. Scan him. The officer raised a handheld device, its light sweeping over Jake from head to toe. The scanner chirped, then displayed results the officer clearly hadn't expected. His eyes widened. No trace of vortex particles, sir. None at all. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then Director Fowle's expression shifted from suspicion to intense curiosity. He stepped closer, peering at Jake as though the human were both miracle and puzzle. That should not have been possible with any technology currently available. Jake lifted his chin. Guess we improvised. The director's gaze narrowed. What exactly did you do, Specialist Thalen? Vela's patterns flickered, betraying her tension even as she spoke with steady professionalism. We achieved complete biometric synchronization. The compatibility between our species generated a harmonic field strong enough to neutralize the particles. Compatibility? The director repeated slowly. His eyes moved between them, lingering on the faint glow still visible beneath Vela's skin. At what level? Vela hesitated, then answered simply, unprecedented. The director turned sharply, striding to her console. He reviewed the streaming data, his own patterns flickering with growing astonishment. Extraordinary. Do you realize what this means? For decades, we've theorized that humans and Meridians may share distant ancestry. This level of compatibility confirms it. Your connection has provided more data in hours than 5 years of research. Jake shot Vela a sideways glance, but she remained composed, though her cheeks had darkened in a blush that belied her calm. Director Fowle turned back to them, his demeanor transformed. This discovery will change everything. Not just biology, but diplomacy, culture, governance. Jake's mind reeled. He had come to this station expecting nothing more than a tedious repair delay. Now he stood in the middle of an event that might reshape interstellar politics. 3 months later, the viewport of the newly expanded Human Meridian Research Center stretched wide before Jake, revealing a traffic of ships gliding toward the station. Human freighters and Meridian cruisers docked side by side, exchanging goods and knowledge. For the first time in living memory, the air of mutual suspicion had softened into something more hopeful. Jake stood with his hands clasped behind his back, the reflection of starlight glimmering faintly in his eyes. His own ship had been repaired long ago, but he had chosen to remain. Repair schedules and missions seemed trivial compared to what had blossomed here and in his life. Footsteps approached behind him, light but familiar. Vela's hands slipped naturally into his, her skin warm, her patterns pulsing faintly with affection. Admiral Crest just arrived from Earth, she said, her tone a mixture of nerves and pride. He's eager to meet the human who helped revolutionize interspecies relations. Jake chuckled. Should we tell him it all started with spilled soup? Her laughter rang like bells. In a ruined shirt. Speaking of which, I still never cleaned that for you. Keep it, Jake said, pulling her closer. A souvenir, proof that laundry day can change galactic politics. They both laughed, the sound carrying a lightness that only came after surviving storms together. Ripples of change. In the months since their discovery, dozens of compatible human meridian pairs had been identified. Each one added new insights, not just biology, but cultural blending, new diplomatic frameworks, even shared art and music projects. Skeptics on both sides had been forced to admit the truth: there was more binding their species together than keeping them apart. But with progress came resistance. There were factions still muttering about contamination, about cultural dilution. Rumors whispered of extremist cells that considered humans and Meridians bonding an abomination. Jake knew peace was never won overnight. Yet every time he looked at Vela, her smile, her glowing patterns, her unwavering honesty, he believed the fight was worth it. The bond beyond science. One evening, as they walked through the arboretum that had become the centerpiece of the new research center, Vela paused by a cluster of luminary ferns. The plants pulsed in gentle greeting, their lights rippling across the leaves like fireflies in rhythm. In Meridian tradition, she said thoughtfully, when two people create a resonance as strong as ours, they're considered permanently bonded. Jake raised an eyebrow. Is that a proposal? Her lips curved into a teasing smile. It's a fact. Whether we formalize it or not, we're connected now. The particles may be gone, but the resonance remains. Jake reached in for her hand, brushing his thumb over the glowing patterns near her wrist. The familiar warmth surged through him, a gentle echo of the powerful field they had once created together. "Then let's make it official," he said quietly, "in both our traditions." Her eyes widened, patterns flaring in bright waves that betrayed her joy. "Are you sure you're people?" "I'm sure," he interrupted, "because the universe has a twisted sense of humor. Out of all the people that could have dropped me in front of it, chose you. And I'm not about to waste that chance." Vela's golden eyes shimmered with unshed tears. She leaned into him, whispering against his lips, "Then we are bonded." Their kiss sealed the vow, soft, certain, more binding than any treaty. Reflection. Later, lying together under the simulated night sky of the Arboretum, Jake found himself laughing softly. What Vela asked, her head resting on his shoulder, patterns glowing faintly against his skin. "I was just thinking," he said, shaking his head. "A failed coil, an emergency landing, a bowl of blue soup, a shirt I should have thrown out years ago, and now—" He gestured at the stars beyond the dome, the bustling alliance forming around them. "This." Her laugh was warm. "The universe loves irony." "Yeah," Jake agreed, brushing a hand over her glowing skin. "But sometimes irony feels a lot like destiny." And in that moment, as their breaths mingled and their hearts beat in quiet synchrony, Jake realized something profound. Humanity's strength had never been its weapons, or its technology, or even its resilience. It was its capacity to connect, to reach across barriers, to take accidents and turn them into miracles. That was what had saved him. That was what had changed everything. And in the infinite expanse of space where stars burned and empires rose and fell, Jake Graham knew one truth would endure. Sometimes all it took was a ruined shirt and the courage to trust what came next.